Hey there, this is Della Rucker, principal of the Wise Economy Workshop, and I'm not quite set up right. A little bit of a last minute scuffle around. I have a shirt that isn't cooperating with me too well today, and I'm trying a new microphone. So we'll see how this goes, and we'll see how it does. So thank you for joining me today. I am the principal of the Wise Economy Workshop, which is a platform for... Whoa, there goes everything. All right. I might have left and come back. Not completely sure. So sorry about that. I may have glitched a little bit. It's not the Matrix. It's just me and my technology and my weird hair that wants to stick up. So it is clearly a Friday. And it is clearly a Friday because things are a little discombobulated at the moment. But I'm grateful for you taking the time to join me today. I'm Della Rucker. I am the principal of the Wise Economy Workshop, which is a platform for thinking and doing relating to how we help the communities that we care about move into a productive and resilient and human capability enabling future. I'm also the author of this book, The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived, which is available anywhere you get your books. And what I have been doing is reading through a section of this book that's called The First Principles. And before I read today, I just wanted to give you a little heads up on a couple of pieces of news. One is that for those of you that aren't aware, I do have a podcast, and the podcast is predominantly focused on interviews that I do with people who I encounter who are doing interesting things in the worlds of economic development, small business revitalization, downtown revitalization, and kind of all of that range of activities that are around helping our communities be better and really live into our collective potential. So there's two new interviews on there that I think you'll greatly enjoy. One is with Kemo Ahakatera, who is the CEO of an organization that I have been working with to help get off the ground called Trep House. Trep House is a super hub platform focused on what we call new majority founders, who are younger, millennial and Gen Z, African American, African diaspora, other kinds of minority or underrepresented business founders and small business owners. And a super hub means that it's providing a whole range of services, kind of a wraparound. So Trep House involves everything from mentoring and classes through to counseling and venture establishment. So establishing the funds and the strategies and being ready to accept funding, which is a huge barrier for a lot of those kinds of entrepreneurs. So that's one interview. Kemo is fantastic. He's amazing. He has read everything, and he's just this fount of knowledge that just pours out. The second interview is with Theo Scalise, who I have interviewed before. And this is focusing, she's the executive director of Cambridge Local First, which is an IBA, an independent business association in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This interview I really love because it's focusing on an issue that a lot of folks feel that they need to take on, but they don't know how to take on. And that is, how can a nonprofit be a helpful resource and play an active, constructive role in public policy relating to the things that they care about. And I love that story in part because Cambridge Local First does not have a lot of staff. In fact, their staff consists of 2, and they're both part-time. So, they get a lot done with very, very little, and I think they're definitely worth taking a look at. A couple other things that have come up is that there's a new short shot out. Short shots are kind of 20-page-ish publications that give you a little more depth than some white papers, but not as long as a full book. You can think of it as like a really short Kindle single. So there's a new one out, and it's actually the first principles from this book, the stuff I've been reading, laid out nice and simple in one easy to read, easy to digest, easy to share document. Certainly easier than giving somebody all of this. So that's available for free at wiseeconomy.com. And you can get a very nice looking download version of those first principles there. If you want a higher resolution, maybe you want to be able to print it and really have the photos look great, and they're great photos. You can go to gumroad.com and find that same short shot. There's a minimal price on it just because you have to put something in. And you'll be able to download a higher resolution of that if you want. But the free version, which should be pretty good, is on wiseeconomy.com. So today's short shot is one of the ones that's actually one of the most difficult. It's also one of the ones that's most important. And it's also one of the ones that in our heads is the easiest to understand because we know what this is about. So I'll read to you. We who intend to help our communities thrive had better be ready to be brave. We have to reconnect to the reasons why we got into doing this. Before the rules and the bureaucracy and the politics took over our field of view, and I might add, or the rules and regulations and details and borderlines and the like. Whether we want to or not, we're going to be on the front line of the fight for new solutions. And we are going to be useless if we're just punching the clock or wandering from election to election or from cool idea to new cool idea. We have to critically reassess our professions and our organizations and our passions and our roles. And we have to find the fortitude to break through the walls that are keeping our communities from being successful. Now, we cannot be foolhardy, and we must admit that we don't have all the answers. But we have to be brave enough to help lead the expedition. So the idea of bravery is always one that is challenging. And it's not language that we're used to using in the context of talking about our public role, because it's kind of emotional language. And we have become so good, and this is an industrial era leftover, at segmenting our, how shall I say this, our emotional or kind of non-intellectual, we don't even have proper words for it really, of separating that side from the intellectual side, the rational side, the, left brain side. I always get those backwards. And the challenge there is that we don't necessarily solve problems correctly if we only do it from a rational, logical point of view, because human beings and the communities that we have created are not strictly creatures of rationality and logic. So we have to come to a more of a balance between the left brain and the right brain in the work that we do in our communities. And I think that's a big piece of where this idea of bravery comes in. So I did a little research. Thank you to the Google Wise Economy Research Department, because, I just put stuff in and things pop up. And so I looked up some definitions of what it means to be brave. So what is bravery? Bravery, according to one source, is enduring risk for the sake of something that is bigger than oneself. So it's different from self-preservation. And it's enduring risk, not necessarily, you're not only brave if you get your legs shot off or you're sacrificed for the context. Bravery is taking on the risk. And I think that's a really important piece. Another source defined that as mental and moral strength. That's another piece of terminology that we're not used to using anymore because we're used to talking about things in a detached professional sort of format. We have ethics, of course, but ethics and morals, it's not the same weight. So mental and moral strength. So I started thinking about what that means. And I started thinking about what that means in our context. And so this isn't exhaustive, but it's but here's a few of the things that I was thinking about as I was trying to prepare to do this today. So one is that in a certain sense, it's easier and also harder for us to be brave when we are coming from a position of privilege. And we all know now that privilege has multiple layers. So I have privilege because I am white, I am older, I have privilege because I have a certain economic standing. I'm obviously not starving. I have a whole variety of areas of privilege. And so in some respects, because I'm not coming from a position of want, it's easier for me to take a step out, to be brave. And I've often admitted that the reason why I have been able to develop this public voice, why I am able to, have these conversations and talk about things like this, is because I have the personal economic stability that if you don't like me, again, I'm not going to starve. And that's a luxury that I have. That's a privilege that I have that not everybody has. But we all have some degree of privilege. The challenge is, interestingly, that sometimes when we have privilege, we don't see ourselves as being able to use that for the benefit of others. We become scared of losing. That risk factor becomes a much larger entity in our heads. So there's a lot of things that get in the way of our ability to be brave. Sometimes that's legitimate fear of what could happen to us if this situation does not go as we desired. Sometimes the risk is really just about people pleasing. Are you going to like me if I have done that? Are you going to like me if I've made that kind of statement? Like I said, I have the luxury of not having to worry about that so much from an economic standpoint, which wasn't always the case in my life. But from a psychological standpoint, I'm a people pleaser. And I can say things that you might not like much more easily to a camera than I can if you and I were sitting and talking face to face. And that's not because I don't have privilege, and that's not because I don't believe what I'm saying, but it's because I want you to like me. So that can keep me from being as brave as I should be. And I talk about this in The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived. I've certainly had times in my career, especially in the years when I was focused on doing consulting, where I wasn't as brave as I wish I had been. And the reason why was extraordinarily core. It was because I didn't want them to not like me. So I think that's a big piece of it. The other thing that I think is really important, so there's two other things that I thought were really important, and you'll have to forgive me for peeking at my notes once in a while. A big piece of bravery actually doesn't look like the stories that we're accustomed to hearing. So we hear about, Martin Luther King and the March on Selma, and they're physically standing strong in the face of opposition. Or we have 1,000, fairy tales. Our fairy tales very often revolve around somebody having to make a choice to be brave. Heck, there's a movie that's called Brave, which somebody pointed out to me the other day that I look like, I don't know, the mother or the grandmother probably of the lead character in that movie. So we get all these messages about bravery being an action, being a stance, being a movement forward or a holding of ground. But increasingly, and I think this is super important for where we are now, bravery is also being able to be empathetic, being able to understand that where somebody else is coming from is just as legitimate and just as valuable, and in some cases more so than where we're coming from. So bravery, especially for a person of privilege, can be taking a step back, can be making space for somebody who is not privileged. And very often people, I used Martin Luther King as an example a minute ago, which is always dicey because, who can live up to that? But people do, and they do every day. There are extraordinarily brave people today across the world who are doing all sorts of things to stand up for the rights of other people in the face of opposition and oppression and so on. And what they're doing very often is coming from a place, sometimes they're coming from a place of privilege, sometimes they're coming from a place of necessity. And sometimes the best thing we can do when we are people who are of privilege in that context is to step back and let those people be the ones who are the voice, who are the center. And sometimes we have to be there to protect them as that's going on. But it's that role of making room for others that I think is really the big bravery that we're called to, especially in this moment of time. And that gets me to kind of the last thing that I wanted to touch on, which is that bravery, as I said before, comes out of necessity. And so when we are people who are privileged, it's very easy for us sometimes to say, well, I don't have to fight that battle today. I don't have to do that today. But here's the kicker. And of course, this is one, if you've been watching these videos or you've read this book or you've heard me in other contexts, you know that this is what's coming, right? We're in an era where a massive transition is underway. And we sometimes don't even see it because it's been going on now for a long time. I, for my own story, usually trace it back to the early 80s and the recession that created what we now call the Rust Belt. Other people, for their own personal timeframes, it'll go back to a different point in their history. But the fact of the matter is that this transition has been unfolding for a lot of us, for most of or all of our lives. And that creates a necessity. There's a lot of things that we do, and I talk about these a lot, whether it's programs or the way we who work in the public sector may interact with people who are residents, or the way we design businesses, or the kinds of products that we put out, or so on and so on. There's a lot of that we don't really have the choice of doing the same way anymore. Sometimes that's what people want. They say, oh, I just want it to go back to being the way it was. But if we're really honest about understanding these changes, and a lot of what the Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived book is about is putting those challenges right in front of our face and saying, we don't have the right to, we don't have the luxury, we don't have the privilege of ignoring those anymore. That means that we have to learn to do things in a very, very different manner. And that, at the end of the day, necessitates us being brave. And so whether we want to be brave or not, we live in a moment in time, and if we care about the communities that matter to us, we're in a position where we have to be brave, no matter whether we want to or not. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we move forward. Anybody who has to be brave has moments of being scared, has moments of second guessing themselves, has moments of saying, I don't want to do this. But we have a responsibility, and we have an obligation. And it has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the fact that the world is changing around us. And we got to step up. We've got to be part of it. Because it ain't going to change. It ain't going to go back to the way it was before. So there's some heavy words for a Friday. Hopefully that gives you something to chew on while you're, in the shower, mowing the lawn, or whatever, over the course of the weekend. So thank you for taking the time to be with me today. If you're interested in getting more into some of the things that we've talked about, you might enjoy signing up for the Wise Economy Substack, which is available at wiseeconomy.substack.com. Subscribers to that Substack get a regular weekly email of news and analysis and updates that focus on how this local economy revolution is really playing out in the world around us and in communities that in many cases might be a lot like ours. And I'm all in favor of rip off and duplicate. Another thing you might benefit from or enjoy is the Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived. That's available any place you get your books, and you can learn more about that and about other books put out by my press at localeconomyrevolutionbook.com. That's localeconomyrevolutionbook.com, and at wisefoolpressbooks.com. So thank you again. Have a great weekend. And as I always tell folks, we got to be brave, and we got to go get them. Thanks.